Okay, thanks. Hey everyone. Welcome to ACDC number 177. This is issue 1990 in the PM repo. The agenda's here in the chat, and yeah, we have a number of things to discuss today. Uh, the short term, looking at Glunterdam and moving forward with DevNets there. Also, some different proposals for Hagoda we'll touch on. And if there's time, we'll have an update on some of the BAL work, or sorry, the repricing work. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So to begin, we have Amsterdam, and yeah, many of these things are kind of all tied together. But maybe to get us started, we've had EPBS DevNet 1 for some time now, but it looks kind of dead. Are there any updates that anyone would like to share? If not, I think ultimately we'll just talk about our plan for how to get back to a stable DevNet, but I'll start it off there. Yeah, Barnabas?
Yeah, so EPBS.NET 1 is pretty much dead, and we decided on ACDT this Monday that we're not gonna try to resurrect it, and rather we're gonna be focusing on EPBS.NET 2, which basically requires 5094, which is basically the next step on the agenda.
Okay, so yeah, then let's just go ahead and get into that. Right. So this came up. I think there was an issue with checkpoint sync and just the intricacies here of finalization with the change of EPBS that breaks apart the payload from the block. As far as I understand, I think this PR is in a pretty good place. Here, let me try to. Oh, wait, Justin got a link. Thank you. Yeah, so I think this PR is in a pretty good place. Any comments on this PR? Otherwise, I think we just go ahead and merge it because it sounds like that's blocking us with the next DevNet. Yeah, POTUS.
I don't know if now or probably by the end of the meeting, but it'd be nice to have a discussion about syncing and gossiping. There's arguments still on whether we want to be duplicating the broadcast of requests.
Okay. Yeah, do we want to get into it? Can you just give us a quick summary?
Oh, yeah. So the issue is that we are now sending the requests on the envelope and also including these requests on the block. We added the requests on the beacon block to keep the state transition function a pure function that takes only the state, the block, and it gives us a new state. If we remove these requests from the block, then we would lose that signature. There's an argument to be made whether or not we want to preserve the signature or not, but that's the current status. And the problem of doing this is that if the requests can be actually very large, and broadcasting on this consensus layer side is dead broadcasting on EPBS because it's just part of the slot that is useless. So the question is whether or not we want to address this now or we want to address this in the future if it becomes a problem. That's the situation. There are some ways we could prevent this from being on the block at the cost of making the state transition function contingent to having that data, that in principle every node should have it because it is on the payload. It also complicates things on checkpoint sync because now when you do checkpoint sync, you actually will need the payload from a previous epoch, presumably, to actually get those requests. So it comes with a bunch of trade-offs.
Yeah. Anyone else have any?
Yeah, just to add to that, I've been participating in the discussion as well. So the question here really is a data flow question more than simply extending the signature from our perspective. What I'm proposing is that if the state transition function remains anyway preconditioned by the node actually having received the execution payload from the previous slot to begin with, if that precondition still exists in eBPS as currently suggested, then what we can do is simply the signature would remain the same. The signature and the beacon block that is sent, that is provided in the call to the STF would be the expanded form. So this would include the execution request. So everything in the PR stays as it is today. The thing that we would do is we would simply expand. So instead of propagating the execution request twice, once on the execution payload and the second time on the next beacon block, we would just propagate a commitment on the beacon block, and the client implementation would expand that commitment with the data that they already have available from the execution payload before providing it to the STF. So really, it's a matter of what data is available when. Not so much about, from my perspective, is not so much about like a puristic, the puristic side of kind of like, do we want to extend the signature or not? Like that's not the gist here. I think the gist is really what data elements depend on what and what can we count on.
Yeah. Quick question for my own understanding. When we're talking about having execution requests on the beacon block, these execution requests are from the execution payload of the previous slot. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Pose.
Yeah, so, well, I mean, regardless of semantics or not, like we could do this. We could like gossip blocks blinded, but this comes with a considerable complications on the implementation. We will need to have a new object, which is a blinded beacon block that is blinded in a different way than it is today. And that's the thing that is being gossiped. Then we would need to change all of the RPC requests for like by range, for example, or when you request a block on RPC to be the unblinded one, and then on gossip to get the blinded one. I think we're going to continue overcomplicating this over something that was essentially an API problem.
I mean, I disagree with that. We're talking about the worst case scenario. Another possibility here is we actually revisit the limits on deposits, because this is there's 8,192. That's the limit on deposits per slot per block. So if we revisit this number, then we can make the payload smaller, right? But otherwise, we're looking at a worst case scenario of 1.5 megabytes, and that is not negligible. And when I actually look at the implementations, I don't think the cost of implementing this, it's a simple expansion. Like it's just one layer, one translation in the data structure. It is a stateful translation, because you do need to have the data that you're expanding available from the previous slot, but it's literally like it can be a ring buffer. It could be not even a ring buffer. You're literally just taking the data from the previous slot. Otherwise, you're not even able to execute the STF in the first place.
No, but
so it just does not. It needs to be
you
curried,
need to do
right?
This, it's interleaved. It's not just on the gossiping side.
Right.
The problems are on the RPC side.
Yeah, but you can store the expanded payload to serve it over RPC. Like, I don't care about the data storage side of things, because the data storage is cheaper than the network. You can store it in the expanded form. You just continue serving it the way that it's being served today. It's just this particular route in the critical path, adding 1.5 megabytes to send duplicate data is extremely inefficient. So we're just talking about a compression or kind of like an expansion method. The other possibility here is reducing. Like, if we really want to go this way, then we need to revisit the deposits, the limit on deposits. If it can be smaller, then like we need to scale this value down. But anyway, one thing that I do want to highlight is that the STF, as I understand it, was built originally, and kind of like this signature that we really care about for it to be pure, was built in a world in which the execution and consensus were in the same object, right? This is no longer the case. So something has to give somewhere. I think we can resolve this by like the solution that wouldn't, from the data architecture perspective, is just like a different scenario, right? So yeah, revisiting the signature is warranted. I think we can keep the signature intact if we just do this expansion.
Nico, then Enrico.
Yeah, so I looked into this a bunch yesterday to just see what are even the implications. So right now, the maximum really that can be achieved is 489 kilobytes, because there's a limiting factor, which is the gas limit. So with 60 million, that's the maximum you can even do. But even that requires you to lock up 6.4 million in ETH, because you need to do these, I think it was 2000 something deposits that are possible. And to reach this 1.5 megabyte limit, we need a gas limit of, let me double check this, 193 million. And it requires to lock up 20.5 million in ETH to even get to that. And the average size of execution requests is really tiny. So I looked at mainnet data from the last 2 weeks, and they are 70 bytes on average. I mean, not to downplay this complaint, but there's also, I think, a thing that the SSC size limit is set way too high. I was looking into discussions when that 6110 PR was implemented, and they set the limit to that, so you don't get into a scenario where the EL could produce a block that produces execution requests that don't meet, or that is higher than this 8,192 limit. But this seems flawed in itself, because if we have a gas limit increase over over 200, for example, million, then this limit it's not sufficient anymore, I guess, because the EL could still produce a block that is invalid. So what I was wondering is, isn't there a way for ELs to have this limit as well, and then we can reduce it even to a lower number? Like the EL could maybe just say, don't include more deposits into a single block than what this limit is.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. I don't know if any EL dubs want to chime in on this. Yeah, I mean, one thing there is it just adds this other limit that we have to synchronize across layers, whereas I think today it's more the EL just puts whatever they have and they don't have to think about it. Enrico?
Yeah, I just want to comment on Raul perspective, because I don't feel that we may say that the Raul perspective is too much complicated, because I feel like he's right saying that we could confine this change in the networking layer and the overall client just on block gossip flow, and make everything else, including RPC, exactly how they are today. So just when we receive the block, during the flow, even before gossip validation could be done, expanding things from what we've received from the payload, and everything remains the same in database and all the other RPC. So I'm not saying that there might be complications, but I'm saying that it's possible that we could have something that is low impact.
Roll. You have your hand up.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Thanks for explaining it, Enrico. That's what I was thinking. It's just on the gossip layer, everything else stays intact. We still save the data structure on the store. We serve it over RPC as it's currently being served. Everything stays intact. It's just on the gossip layer. Instead of duplicating the data, we just.
But there is a complication.
Yeah.
If
Okay,
we
so
want to
that's interesting.
be
Yeah.
super resilient here, is we need to cover the situation in which the client doesn't have the payload and maybe wants
Right.
only something actually to be able to import the block.
Yeah,
So,
but then we're back in the scenario with routes, right? Because you can't really, you would then be moving the beacon state
Yeah,
without moving the
it would just
execution state.
another input to the envelope by the payload by route request. It will trigger that, and the client should download the missing payload. Yeah, I think like, yeah, we don't need to have a specific RPC to get just the execution request unblinded from clients. I don't know if there is any reason to have a specific RPC. But yeah, it's possible that you just
Yeah,
need to
so
trigger the
yeah,
payload again, and you can unblind, and everything flows.
yeah. So from my perspective, and please correct me if my assumption is wrong here, but the design assumption is that PTC is a strong enough signal of network-wide availability of the execution payload to execute the STF now with the non-dual form, so to speak. You would anyway need to have the execution payload. I think if you want to advance, if I'm understanding the current proposal correctly, if you want to advance the chain, you would need to have the execution payload anyway. So is that wrong? Is this assumption wrong?
Yeah,
That's my
definitely.
understanding.
You need to have the previous payload if you want to
Right.
build the next beacon block on top of it.
Right, right. So then it would be, so if you don't have it, it's either a propagation fault, right, that it didn't get there in time, but also if PTC was positive, right, then at that point you also have a PTC fault in the sense that the PTC signal that we got was not consistent with what the network saw. There's always going to be outliers, of course, but then the fallback path for those outliers would just be conducting the RPC call to one of their peers that is synced to head and simply fetching the full block. The beacon block we know is tiny, so I would prefer that path because it's just a fallback path from my perspective, right? That is not going to be exercised on the critical path by every node. It's just those nodes that fail to receive the payload in time would just invoke the RPC. And if I remember correctly from the numbers, the resulting beacon block was tiny anyway, so it shouldn't. So if you're really only interested in the execution payload at that point, then the cost of receiving the beacon block as well in the response is just residual. It's just tiny, so it shouldn't matter.
Barnabas?
My perspective is a much better space of the design trade-off here.
Yeah, there is also the other side of it, that you have to blind it during publishing. So there is an unblinding, and then the proposer needs to blind that while doing the
Yeah, but
proposal.
you just put the hash tree of the struct in there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's the blinding is trivial. It's just
Yeah.
a tiny complication, and I don't know if there are clients that have some kind of strong tightening between the block type and what is on the publishing side. So if some clients have some assumptions and they have to break that assumption, maybe it could be a complication.
I imagine there's enough change already with EPBS that's fine to me. Barnabas?
Yeah, that would be my main question here, that do we really want to keep pushing this decision based on potential duplication of like 17 bytes? What Nico said, that would be the average case. I know that the worst case is looking significantly worse, but even 1.5 megabyte on a 3000 deposit slot is very, very unlikely to happen. And we're not going to get many of those even on mainnet. Like,
I
is
think
this
on
really
Rico,
something we have to deal with?
yeah, it's a good question. Enrico?
I feel like we can definitely postpone this if the assumption is correct, which is the only way we could move forward with this. So the assumption is this approach is simple. If it is, we can postpone it later as an addition, because it won't change anything on the consensus layer. It will be just a networking change, and we can decide it to do this later after a better evaluation of it.
Right. So yeah, the proposal would be then to have them duplicated and someone help me. Is this the current status of 5094?
So
Yeah,
currently they are duplicated, yeah. But we don't even need them in the envelope because like they are kind of duplicated in the transactions already, right? Like the payload itself contains the transactions for the deposits, and you can always generate the execution requests from that. So I think with the PR, we could even drop them from the envelope, but we would need to update the engine API, I think, so the EL can return them. And then the next proposal needs to include them in the beacon block, but you would get rid of the data duplication.
I would not introduce an engine API change for this, but that's just my personal take.
Yeah. And then one quick question to POTUS's comment here, in terms of RPC. RPC will change either way, right?
No, so the problem is that the reason why 5094 was even proposed was that clients were having problems with checkpoint sync. And the problems they were having with checkpoint sync was that they got a state and they needed to request data from an epoch that was previous to the slot on the state. 5094 in the current status solves that problem. If we remove the request from the block, this problem will go back to the status that was before 5094. And then to solve that problem again, we're going to introduce changes on the RPC to have the RPC return the unblinded block, and then on gossip having the blinded block. I think we'll just keep adding complexity over things that are not really strictly necessary on consensus. Already 5094 is not necessary for consensus. We just accepted it because it like simplifies implementation. I agree with Enrico. We should just go with 5094. We agreed that that was that simplification to all of us, and then later on decide whether or not we want to include these changes to avoid the duplication or not.
Yeah, that's how I'm leaning as well at the moment.
Yeah.
Roll.
I'm good with that. I just want to maybe scope what the exact ask is for clients to investigate. Like Enrico said, the current hypothesis is that simply adding a very simple translation at the gossip layer only, nothing in RPC changes, nothing in the store changes, everything remains the same, nothing in the STF changes. The only thing that changes is on the proposer side of things. On the proposer, you would be blinding, and on the receiving side of things, you would be expanding, and that's it. Everything else stays the same. And the assumption is that simply by having a cache of one slot of the previous slot or the parent slot would be sufficient. There might be some edge cases here, and I think that's the thing that we're interested in finding out, if there are edge cases that we're not seeing.
Yeah, that makes sense. In the specs, like we'd have sort of like, yeah, I think the straightforward way that you would do this is you'd have like new block types in the spec. Maybe this is like an optimization. Well, that would be messy too. So in any case, yeah, hear what you're saying. It might be harder than it sounds. But yeah, let's get back to the current topic. Then it sounds like we're all in agreement to go ahead and merge 5094 to get past this issue. There may be an ask down the line to add this optimization that Roll is proposing. And is everyone okay with that? Okay. Okay, got some thumbs up. Okay, cool. So let's do that. Thank you, everyone. This stuff, the devil's always in the details. So in any case, from there, I forget what these comments are. Oh, yeah, okay. So I think from here, I might hand it over to Barnabas because he had a number of comments that are kind of all interrelated, just around scope and how we want to move forward with the DevNets. There's BAL DevNet 4, EPBS DevNet 2, that's going to reflect some of the changes we were just discussing. And then, of course, the road to Amsterdam DevNet 0. Along with that, go ahead.
There's just one more quick PR that I think we should discuss. 5067.
Okay, well, I think you have 3 now. So do you just want to run through them?
Yeah, so 5067 is basically clarifies the Globus Genesis questions, and this is gonna be rebased on top of 5094. I'm just not sure what the current state of this PR right now.
Yeah, it's from Brecky. I don't know if they're on the call. Otherwise, yeah, is this something we need to merge before we can move forward with DevEts?
Yeah, ideally.
Okay.
So the main reason we need this in is when we're testing out the builder workflow, having the builders already available at Genesis basically enables us to get the builders working without needing to make builder deposits.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. Brecky left a comment that this should be revisited after 5094. So yeah, maybe then we can do that, say today or tomorrow, and circle back to this on Monday. Okay, he's in the chat here. Okay. Does 5094 change anything, or it just needs a rebase? Okay, it does change. So does that work, Barnabas, if we just handle this on Monday then?
Yeah, ideally we want to have everything merged by tomorrow, I think.
Okay. Yeah, it sounds like we can do that then.
I'm targeting to make a release today or tomorrow. I would like to get it in before then. That's the target.
Perfect. Okay. Otis, did you have your hand up for this?
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, is there a strong opposition to targeting Glamsterdam DevNet 1 or DevNet 0, whatever it's called, for interop? I mean, it seems from our perspective, from my perspective on the CL side, it seems very low risk to add EPBS, to add vals to EPBS. I understand that for a val DevNet, this might be a problem. So they might want to keep another DevNet that is just pure vals without EPBS. But for us, I think very low risk in just including vals and start testing directly on Glamsterdam.
Yeah, I think Barnabas wanted to talk about that, but also he was going to cover these 2 other PRs first.
Yeah, so Ball.NET 4 is targeting to launch next week, Friday, and that is the same day when we plan to launch APBS.NET 2. And ideally, Amsterdam DevNet 0 could be launched on the first day of interop, which would be the spec of Ball.NET 4 plus APBS.NET 2 without adding any other EIPs. So this would require a new CL release as well, Alpha 6, which would introduce the ball changes on the CL side. And then ideally in the last day of interop, we could also do Amsterdam DevNet 1, where we basically introduce a few or no other CL EIPs and some or none EL EIPs. You can find more details about everything in the issue of this call.
Yeah.
Terrence.
My immediate feedback by looking at it is that you want to do EPBS DevNet 2 on Friday, then you want to do Glimpse and DevNet 0 the first day of interrupt. Then there's not much time in between, right? It's just the weekend and people are traveling during that part. So I think like my proposal is that I think it will be actually much easier. You just do Glimpse and DevNet 0 on the end of Friday and just skip DevNet 2 because I still think it's gonna work if you want to do two DevNets back to back, but then the only gap is the weekend and people are traveling.
The idea is that on Monday we're gonna be spending the whole day figuring out the CL changes, and block level access lists are still not stable, and that is the main reason we want to keep it separate. Because I'm assuming that EPBS DevNet 2 is also not gonna be stable, and if neither of them are stable on Friday, then having a very messy network will not benefit anyone.
Yeah, but I just don't think like there's enough time between DevNet 2 and DevNet 0. If you want to just bring in Bell, it's just much easier to do everything together at that point.
Well, unless there's a lot of bugs from merging them. If we relax the timing of Amsterdam DevNet 0, does that make everyone feel better?
So I actually studied like the differences, like the overlapping part is actually surprisingly small because of the Bell changes a couple of things. One thing on the beacon state, and then the payload, the header, and then the engine API call. And turns out those things are minimally touched by 5094.
Yeah, and so we're not worried about like some BAL bug on the EL causing issues with the EPBS state transition and breaking things.
Well, there's definitely risk, right? But I think that's a possible route. I just think it's impossible to do DevNet 2 on Friday, then DevNet 0 Glimpse, and then on the first day of interrupt. There's just no time.
Right. But like, what if we make it the second day? Like, I think, at least what I would say is it's more important to get in one more cycle of them separated, just because like we haven't even had a stable DevNet 1. So then DevNet 2 stable would give us like a good foundation then to work on the merge. And I would imagine that if we just go for the merge, it will just add more issues to work through than otherwise.
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. I just wanted to mainly point out there's not enough time in between. But if you want to give it more time for DevNet 0, then that's fine. But in my opinion, I think it's just more productive to just do it all together. But I will let others chime in.
Yeah. Photos?
If we decide to do together, then we can start testing on kurtosis now. I think Dustin is probably pointing the same thing. We want to get into interrupt already having kurtosis runs on clients. And if we're going to be wasting a week trying kurtosis only on EPBS, and then later we're going to have to anyways make changes to run them on kurtosis to check whether Vals is changing anything or not, I think it's just wasted time. We can and should start testing with Vals on the CL side. And I don't think the kind of bugs that you mentioned are even possible, the kind of bugs that Vals would just affect on the CL side. I think EPBS bugs could screw up the Val DevNet, make it unstable. So I do understand why EL devs might want to have a separate DevNet, but I think on the CL side, we're going to be better off having just one.
Well, if there's just one, that would be it, right? Like I feel like I think that's also part of the calculus here is like the idea is this would be the merged DevNet so that then, you know, both layers are working on together. So do any EL devs actually want to speak to us? That might be helpful. Or if they're not here, Barnabas, what do you think about just relaxing the timing that you have for Amsterdam DevNet 0?
I don't think it's the timing that is of question from POTUS. Like they basically want Amsterdam DevNet 0 next week Friday, right?
That's the proposal, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah.
It's mostly a timing issue. I don't really mind much. We're not really on a rush. It's just time saving.
Yeah, I would really want to hear the opinion of other CL devs as well.
Also, please take into note that there are some CL changes already in block level access list devnets, and those would also be merged into your EPBS branches.
So yeah, other CL client teams. I think we've heard from Nimbus and Prism.
The slot norm is very minimal, by the way. So that's a minor one.
Okay. Other client
In
teams have an
that
opinion
case,
here.
if we do end up going with Amsterdam DevNet 0 next week Friday, then I would actually target to do block level access list DevNet 3 scope with the Alpha 5 changes from the CL side.
Okay, and then you'd merge in the DevNet 4 stuff in DevNet 1, or how do you think about that?
Yeah. Or maybe we can do like Amsterdam DevNet 1 in the first or second day of interop, and there we could add the 7976 and 7981 there. I would just like to test those separate on local access list network before we can merge it in. But yeah, they are also quite isolated, so it might also make sense. If we can do maybe local access list DevNet 4 on Thursday instead of Friday, then we could try Amsterdam DevNet 0 on Friday as well, just the day after. If it's stable. If it's not stable, then I would just stick to DevNet 3, assuming that DevNet 3 is stable by end of next week.
Yeah. Okay. Then, yeah, I think otherwise from Lighthouse, no strong preference, but lean towards one DevNet. So yeah, I mean, I think then I'd go ahead and propose this. Let's skip EPBS DevNet 2 and instead just target DevNet 0 of Glamsterdam with the spec versions part of us just gave. So
yeah, then Justin would also need to make sure to merge in the slot num and the block level access list stuff into Alpha 5.
Okay. Yeah, Justin says sounds good to me. Terrence, does that work for you? Okay, he said yes. Okay, cool. Then
Sorry, I have
sounds
one
like
last question, if you don't
sure.
mind. That is there a block level access list spec that's out already against consensus layer repo? Because I couldn't find anything out, and I really wanted to implement it like last weekend. And yeah, is there something I can do?
Yes, this exists. You can go to blockaccesslist.xyz and the CL specs or the engine API specs are linked there.
But is there a PR that's open?
Yeah, open a PR, man. Stop sending us to different.
Yeah, I'm just on my phone right now, so the link is up there. There is a PR there.
Okay, and it's up to date, right?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Awesome.
Yeah, do we know if it's this link here, Tony, under features 7928?
Yes, I think that's it.
Okay.
I will double check it, but I think it should be right, yeah.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so are we good then? At least, yeah, Barnabas, are you clear on the changes to this proposal? And then everyone else, we're clear on targeting Glamsterdam DevNet 0, right?
Yeah. One more thing that I would like to discuss is also maybe we can start discussing DevNet 1 scope so that we are like aware of like what kind of changes we want to be working on during interop. Because we're not going to have another ACDC call before that. So I would propose that we either do nothing, no additional EIPs, I would not like to offer this as a suggestion, but option B would be to add 8045, which is the exclusion of slash validators, or option C would be EIP 8080 plus 8061, which is the churn rework and the exit via consolidation queue. Both of those still need to be merged into the consensus spec. I'm just curious what CL teams would prefer.
Any thoughts? I think, yeah, I would generally propose that we focus on getting the other stuff stable first. But then, yeah, if we want to have some things queued up.
Yeah, I think we should just have a nice target to hit in case.
I'm thinking, yeah.
Yeah. If
I
you're
mean,
gonna be
the
all together,
staking, the like option C you have here are like very nice staking UX things.
Is that defined as a stretch goal for interop in that case, or what's the plan there? Because I think we haven't stressed anything, and often once we start stressing stuff, we tend to find edge cases, and it's probably very productive if we're together to find those edge cases.
Yeah, I think stretch goal would be good. And the
yeah, so
question is,
like
what should it
these
be?
are isolated EIPs that people that don't work necessarily on Glamsterdam directly, they could also be focused on this, and they could be they're pretty isolated, so they could be tested independently as well.
Okay. Does the client team have an opinion here? Otherwise, I'd lean towards nothing or these staking EIPs myself. Okay. I guess another way is just take a look. And Barnabas, you could either ask again on Monday during ACDT or next week ACDE. Otherwise, yeah, maybe it's just something we handle during interop. Okay. And then Barnabas, you had, I think, 2 other comments. Do you want to cover those now, or do you feel like we've covered them sufficiently? We haven't really talked about them. This is the cell level deltas and the PR to the 8045.
Yeah, so the one of them is just the meta EIP for Amsterdam, basically moving the networking EIPs into their own section with ETH 70, 71, and 72, and also adding the sellable data as the networking EIP for Amsterdam. These are all optional EIPs. I think we have done this in the past. It's just formatting change.
Okay. And what does optional mean here? That it's in the meta EIP, but you don't have to implement it by the fork?
Yeah. Realistically, this is mainly a question of these ELs with ETH 70, 71, and 72.
Yeah.
I think they're also working heavily on implementing all 3 of those.
Okay. We could get a temp check here and then take it to ACDE next week then. POTUS, you have your hand up.
I want to ask a technical question. It's going to be fast, but point me later when you finish this talk.
Okay. Yeah, does anyone here have an issue with including this PR, which adds, yeah, 8136 to the meta EIP? This is generally consistent with what we've discussed in the past and what I think many of you are working on, so it's not a surprise. Okay, we got it, it's fine. From Lighthouse?
Yeah.
Do you want to run this by the EL devs next week, Barnabas?
I mean, the EL devs, yeah, for formatting wise, sure. but the addition of the partial cells EIP, that doesn't concern them. That only
Yeah, okay.
concerns the CLFs.
Okay. I guess the question is, what if we include this in the meta EIP and then it doesn't get shipped with Amsterdam? Like, is that weird? Do we just take it out later? Do we mark it optional?
I mean, the partial cell is optional, and we have 2 client implementations that are pretty much ready to go. So
Yeah.
I think others are also working on it. I think it would be a nice stretch goal as well for everyone to try to merge it in by Amsterdam. That's why I would like to list it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
also allowed to ship partials ahead of Amsterdam. It would be just nice to start testing it on a testnet. And if you have your changes in the trunk branches, just let us know, and then you can. Oh, it was a joke. Okay, never mind that.
It was ambitious, but yeah, a joke, but also ambitious. Yeah, okay. Then I would say let's go ahead and merge this in. And yeah, we should be good there. And then did you want to talk about 8045? And then we'll
Yeah.
wrap up this section.
So 8445 has a little bit of change that I'm proposing. So originally the idea was that slash validator should be excluded from proposing blocks, but I would like to expand the scope into exclude it from all validator duties.
Yeah, I took a look, and this might look kind of heavy just because it touches more of the spec rather than less.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think generally this is probably
it's a bit more
simplifies reasoning
complete.
about the
That's right there.
protocol. Yeah.
Mhm.
Has anyone else had a chance to look at this? So yeah, just to reiterate, this would, so 8045 right now, it says if you're slashed, you can't propose. And this change just extends it to all duties. So if you're slashed, you just don't do anything. Any thoughts?
We've never had time to actually check on the problem that this brings, which is the fact that it changes this kind of states that we can use from being head or anything that is compatible with the shuffling to being the right state, having the not only the shuffling but the right balances. I'm scared of that change, but I haven't really thought deeply about it because we're implementing something else. My default would be not to include this and aim it for later if we find time to analyze that statement.
Okay. Those are good points. Any other thoughts on this? If not, I would maybe suggest Barnabas. We just run this again during interop and see if we can make more
Sure.
progress in person. Yeah. Okay, cool. And then yeah, circling back to POTUS, I'm assuming you might have a question about the BAL stuff.
Yeah, so I'm reading the spec. I just want to make sure of something. The changes are that we change the payload and that's it, nothing else. I mean, there's a corresponding engine API call because the payload will have this extra thing, but it seems wrong to me to have this root and the header changes in the beacon state. This should not affect the beacon state at all. And I think it's also wrong to change the process execution payload. We should not change the process execution payload at all. So I think the only changes are on structure, just the payload changes and the engine API changes. And slotnam also changes the engine API with the attributes. But there's no structure changes on the CL side as far as I can say, besides the payload change. If that's the case, I can open the PR right now.
Yeah, I think that's right. That sounds about right, and go for it.
If we are gonna do this engine API change anyway, do we also want to now do the new payload response, add a field to the new payload response. So we would remove the duplicate data that we were talking about in the beginning, introduced in 5094.
Aaron says here in the chat, we should do that to be consistent. I think that was about the current question, right?
So I think we need to see how ELs handle this right now, maybe before doing that. Because from my understanding is we send this as part of the new payload right now, and then the EL basically generates the execution requests from the receipts of the transactions and then compares the two lists. And if they don't match, then the payload is invalid. So with that change, what we would need to do is the EL sends back the list and the CL checks the response against the commitment and to see if they match to what the builder committed to. But I'm not sure. We just talked about this on Discord, so I don't think we have looked into the details yet, and would be good to have EL devs chime in.
Nico, could you maybe open a PR on the execution API side so that the EL devs can take a look at that and see if it's something that we could be targeting for the next DevNet?
Yes, definitely, I can do that. Yeah.
POTUS, I would actually target this optimization now because we are touching the engine API now anyway. So the AL teams would have to make the changes, and this just feels like a small change.
Well, it's not really small because it would affect also the objects that we're gossiping on the CL side. It would affect the way that we're handling things. We expected the request to be on the envelope. Now we no longer would expect the request to be on the envelope. I think it's an easy change. I just think if we keep piling changes, we're never going to ship. I want to ship.
Okay. So are we going to do this or not right now?
Maybe let's open the PR on the engine API spec and then circle back to it during interop.
It's
But
not
now-
only an engine API change. It's a PR that needs to be included in the CL repo as well. I mean, it's not an engine change. It's a consensus change as well.
Okay, so then maybe to move forward, if someone can open the PR, we can start to wrap our heads around it, and yeah, we'll figure out if it's an interrupt thing or post interrupt. Sound good? Okay. Cool. Okay, Justin had one more question. I'm not sure what this is. Can you give a summary of the change, Justin?
Yeah, it just swaps two fields in the state. I mean, it makes sense, but it's just maybe a little annoying to implement.
I see. Interesting. Okay.
I don't know. Just
Have
wanting
people had a
confirmation.
chance to look at this? Yeah, I don't know. We have a good number of people saying it's fine. So yeah, let's just go ahead and merge it then.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, cool. I lost the agenda. Here it is. Okay. Anything else on Glamsterdam? Maria wanted to give an update on the repricing stuff, but I think I'm going to hold that till the end if there's time, so we can cover Higuita stuff. Any other Glamsterdam things for right now? It sounds like we have a pretty clear plan to interrupt. There are many open questions, but that's the point. Okay, then let's move to Hegota. And yeah, just a quick reminder. So we've opened the nod headliner proposal process, or window, I should say. This is going to run for some time. I think ultimately, it'd be best to kind of time this with Amsterdam progress, and that's a bit uncertain at the moment. So then that means the end of this window is a bit uncertain, but ultimately, there will be ample notice for people both here and watching this recording, either now or later. Anyone in the community who hears this, yeah, you'll get a notice about that. You should assume you'll have, probably weeks, like more than a month at this point from today. But yeah, so we are there. And point being, already today, there were 2 requests to discuss some proposals. So let me make sure I get this in order. Okay, the first one from Ocean, EIP 7716. If you're here and want to take a couple minutes to give us the TLDR, now would be a good time.
Perfect. Am I sharing my screen properly?
I can see it, yeah.
Sweet. Nice to meet you, everyone. Plan here is to briefly reintroduce you guys to an EIP that we'd like to put forward for Hegota called correlated downtime penalties. So the problem that we're looking to solve with this is that liveness failures aren't particularly penalized unless and until you go over 66% downtime. That's when the kind of quadratic penalty kicks in. So for the most part, losing 10% of the network doesn't have a particularly significant impact on those offline, and it in fact also penalizes the people online. We think there's a bit of a missed opportunity and something we can do to try and incentivize people not to have the most correlated setups so that we're in a better position if ever there is some kind of mass slashing situation. The EIP is pretty simple and kind of concept, and then the implementation side we can kind of talk about. But something that's pretty important to note is that this penalty spikes up literally just at the beginning of this decrease, and it doesn't actually continue to have high penalties while downtime is ongoing. This is deliberate such that the bigger centralized entity that has on-call teams and can get things rectified faster don't have a benefit versus the smaller orgs. Picture says 1,000 words. Why does this matter? Right now, I think the validator set is not in really a great shape from a decentralization perspective. Delegating fees are like 1% and 0, so a lot of small and medium operators are shutting down, and a lot of people are kind of agglomerating in a couple of cheap bare metal data centers in Europe, and I think that proves a risk to the network. As I mentioned earlier, I think a key upside for this is if we correlated penalize on liveness, that will have us in a better position, that we're less likely to be in a correlated slashing position if that ever happens. Generally speaking, the kind of way this impacts is solo stakers and geographically diverse stakers see no change from the usual downtime penalties, and this mostly impacts the kind of larger operators. You can see here from research by Tony, kind of 2 graphs to try and exemplify this. So here in kind of his clustering analysis, you can see the smaller clusters see the reduction in penalty, and looking at it by kind of named orgs, Rocket Pool and Solo Stakers stand out as the people that get, the biggest reduction in penalties. Everyone else gets mostly a modest increase, if anything. The kind of key questions that I've kind of pre-prepared or surfaced from people between here and an SFI decision is things like, do we have the curve the right shape? Is this actually enough? Right now it's set to only have a 4x increase. I'd love to kind of straw poll people that kind of have a decision around, if we did lose 20% of the network, how many days or weeks does it feel appropriate to make it back, such that you incentivize yourself to change provider and not end up in a situation where you're down with 20% of the network in future. Questions around client diversity, small validators, could it increase adversarial behavior? Does timing games come into this? Can that harm the kind of most decentralized end? Does it change the STF by much? Could it do anything weird on the chain tip? Does this impact operator consolidation? I think that one, not really. It's based on ETH, not on key count. and the usual, opportunity cost of is it worth it versus other decentralized EIPs. The published research is, one from Vitalik originally, two from Tony. There are links here. I straw poll some of the client teams, and you can kind of see some open issues that are like, yeah, soft yes, but need to like harden some questions. And that's pretty much it. And would love to get anyone's, feedback either verbally or in the chat about things that you'd like to see solidified in this to bring it on the maturity path for Hagoda. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Any questions? One thing that might be helpful is like a very, sort of initial early proof of concept implementation, just to de-risk the scope here when we do go to think about including this with other things in Hagoda. And
Yeah.
it might be a little tricky to get that, but I think the more you can do, the merrier.
Phil implied that there was a mock implementation before. I don't know who NC is.
NC, I think, from Lodestar. But either way, yeah, just something to keep in mind. And if you have someone you've been working with, just follow up.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Okay. Next up then, we had another proposal from Dimitri here for EIP 8205. If you'd also like to take a few minutes to say some words about it.
Sure. Unfortunately, I'm not that well prepared as Oshin, and I did not have slides. However, the thing that I want to present today is pretty simple and straightforward, and probably none of you would need any slides to understand what we are trying to solve. So what we are trying to solve with 8205 is a very long-living deposit front-run vulnerability. So as you all know, right now, when you make a deposit to a validator, only the first one counts, and the first deposit, larger than 1 ETH for sure, will set withdrawal credentials for the validator once and for all. So with the delegated staking, where the funds are controlled by one entity and the validator is controlled, the validator private key is controlled by the other entity, which is the absolute majority of all Ethereum staked, for sure, there is a chance that I wouldn't say there's a chance, there is a possibility for the owner of the validator private key to front run any deposit transaction made by the counterparty that controls funds, so that they insert their transaction with 1 ETH deposit, setting up withdrawal credentials to their own address, so that any other transaction from the funds holder would land on the validator. But since this validator would already have different withdrawal credentials set, this funds would effectively be stolen by the owner of the validator private key. And there is no reasonable way to protect from that other than sophisticated monitoring systems, other than doing multiple checks on chain and off chain to ensure that your transaction, your deposit transaction as the holder of the funds or as the counterparty that controls the funds at the moment, to ensure that the validator you're making deposit to has not been previously deposited, because again, the front run might happen in the same block using MEV relays or whatever. So what we are proposing here is a simple and elegant solution to this problem. Given that starting from the introduction of EIP 4788, which allows execution layer to get access to the data on the consensus layer, we propose to leverage this opportunity and introduce a pre-registration and optional pre-registration mechanism for the validator keys, so that before making any deposit, a staking protocol or any delegated staking entity, like using smart contracts or not using smart contracts, can ensure that the pre-registration exists for the given validator key, and that they can safely make a deposit, making sure that their transaction would not be front-run and the withdrawal credentials would not be set to a different address. The pre-registrations happen through a simple mechanism of propagating messages from execution layer to consensus layer in the same way as we do for execution layer withdrawal requests, consolidations, and so on and so forth. The pre-registration messages and the pre-registration objects, they have a lifetime so that people would not be able to overextend the consensus layer state. So whenever you do a pre-registration, there is a lifetime after which the pre-registration is removed. And provided that this information would be stored in the consensus layer state, staking protocols, and again, any other delegated staking party would be able to ask for a proof that such a pre-registration exists before making a deposit to a validator key. And that's pretty much the gist of the EIP. So the core idea here is to finally fix this deposit front run vulnerability that had been with us since the very, very first day of Beacon Chain. And we are living with the Beacon Chain and the consensus layer for more than 4 years already. And this thing had never been fixed. So we believe that the time has come to propose and to implement such a small, elegant, and simple fix to this problem. I'm happy to answer any questions should you guys have any.
Yeah, I have one that might be straightforward, but how do you prevent front running of the pre-registrations?
You are not preventing front running of the pre-registrations. You are simply saying that you will only make a deposit to a validator if the pre-registration exists, if with the correct withdrawal credential. If pre-registration exists with an incorrect withdrawal credentials, you will not make a deposit. So you are basically getting an opportunity to know beforehand that your deposit will succeed and will land on the validator with the correct withdrawal credentials.
Okay, so yeah, it's almost like a pre-commit and then a commit, or like it's like an optimistic thing. If you go to deposit and it doesn't match, yeah, actually what happens to the deposit then?
This deposit is simply ignored in the same way as incorrect deposits are handled these days.
Then you burn these.
Correct, but you have the opportunity, and yes, so this mechanism is optional, and if you want to opt in to use this mechanism, you need to make sure that you ask for pre-registration proof before making deposit. For the others, for those not willing to use this mechanism, they can still continue working in the same way that they did before. So the beauty of this is that it's fully optional, but for those who are concerned about this vulnerability, there is now a clear path to resolve this vulnerability.
Yeah. I guess one more quick question because we have a few minutes. Yeah, I haven't thought about this myself. I think I talked to Greg about this actually at ACDC, and haven't had time to think about it since, but I do wonder if you can do this with smart contracts. Like you could have a pre-registration gate smart contract that then submits the deposit for you if it matches.
Unfortunately, right now, with the current state, there is no way to prevent it on the smart contract level because the game here is very simple. The owner of the validator private key can always be faster than any transaction you would like to do from the execution layer. And the only case when you can guarantee that is when you guarantee it on the consensus layer where the request is actually processed. Right. So right now, and as Barnabas mentioned, yes, there is a way to solve it on the upside, and like we're solving it right now. However, it costs Lido and in any other delegated staking protocol, like literally millions of dollars every year to maintain the system. So the current system in Lido is probably one of the most sophisticated because it does not involve risking pre-deposits of 1 ETH. But the system is complicated and very hard to maintain in between the forks. The other protocols, they use mechanism. I would call this mechanism rocket pool like, where either the owner of the private key is required to post a bond of 1 ETH and make this initial deposit of 1 ETH. But this is not acceptable for the protocols where validators do not post a bond at all. And again, this is the majority of the network. So the protocols right now are either risking 1 ETH per validator or having a very complicated system in place. And the problem is that these systems are not standard, and each and every protocol have to pay this price. So what we are asking for here and what we are proposing is to make a simple change to a consensus layer that would be fully optional again, and that would not interrupt any existing schemes, any existing protocols, especially those making this 1 ETH deposit, but would allow many protocols to stop maintaining this complicated system and stop spending thousands of dollars and focus again on more important things like keeping up with Ethereum and implementing things that are important for Ethereum other than simply having to maintain this pretty heavy weighted systems.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay. If not, then
Again,
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, like I want to finally point out that the change to the consensus layer itself is like extremely simple, and please go check out this EAP. It would not break anything, but that would solve a lot of problems. So from the implementation perspective, it's a very simple thing. And from LIDA side, we are ready to develop and audit the reference implementation of the so-called safe deposit contract, where people would be able to provide their deposit signature plus the expected withdrawal credentials plus the proof of the fact that pre-registration exists, and make a safe deposit, no questions asked, through a smart contract that would be again developed, provided, and audited by LIDA if such a reference implementation will be considered as needed.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. Thank you. If there are no other questions on that, then yeah, we'll just keep it on the table for later once we get back to scoping headliner proposals. And yeah, we'll have both this and 7716 in the set. Okay. Then I think we are here. We have the last thing on the agenda. Maria wanted to give an update on the repricings. And I think this is mostly an EL thing, but yeah, if you wanted to say something, Maria, you could take a few minutes.
Right. So it will be fast. It was just to give a quick update. So we had the Amsterdam repricing breakout last Wednesday, and we did a couple of decisions on the final spec for the state growth EIP, so 8037. And I think it changes a few things on how state-related refunds work. And I can give a bigger update on the next ACDE, but it's just to communicate that yeah, we've solved the open issues we had on that EIP. So the next spec that Spencer is working on should be more stable, but also to say that we kind of did a rework on how state gas is charged and refunded that I think now aligns much more to the actual cost. So we only really charge for state growth when actual state is created, which I think it's nice. So yeah, just a quick update on that. And again, I can probably do a bigger update in the next ACDE. Thank you.
All right, amazing. Thank you. If there are no follow-up questions or comments about that, yeah, anyone have anything? Spencer here has a link to spec changes for that as well. Cool. Okay, I believe this is everything on the agenda. Let me just make a quick scan here, but I think we touched on it all. Okay, cool. Yeah, if there's nothing else, then yeah, again, I think everyone will be very busy. Oh, Barnabas?
Yeah, all the EL devs, please start to think about what would you like also on Amsterdam DevNet 1 scope, which kind of EIPs, because we still have a bunch of EL side EIPs. And just check my comment on ACDC.
Okay. POTUS?
I opened the trivial PR for balls on the CL side. It seems to me that it's only the payload change and nothing else. If we can agree on the engine API changes for the DevNet, that would be great. In particular, it seems to me that it's only the changes on the engine API that we send the balls now on with the payload, and the slot number if we send them on the payload attributes. I don't know if that should be in the DevNet or not, but let's try to get the engine API ready quickly so we can just start having this now on develop.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for putting that together. Very fast. Okay. There was one thing here from Mark, just a heads up. We will have a native account abstraction breakout next Wednesday, 1500 UTC. And the agenda is linked here in the chat if you want that. Otherwise, it's in the PM repo. And okay. I think then that's it. Again, last call for anything else. Okay. If not, then great. Yeah, I think everyone will be super busy getting the DevNets together as we move towards interop. And yeah, good luck with that, everyone. And I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye.